get the opportunity to spend some time meeting our speaker for today, Dr. Rob Carter from Creation Ministries International, and looking forward to his time with us in this hour as well as the hour to come. Just hope that you're planning on being with us for both of our sessions and just really learn and enjoy and grow in your understanding of biblical creation and all the things that we're going to be looking at this morning. Let's have a word of prayer, and then our speaker's going to come and share with us this morning. Father God, we are grateful for this beautiful morning. We're thankful to be able to come and to spend time as the body of Christ visible, to join in corporate worship and praise. Father, to be reminded of your omnipotence and, Father, how you brought about this glorious world in which we live in. And, Father, we're just thankful for the opportunity to be together this morning. We're thankful for our speaker and for the safety that you've given him as he's made his way here. I pray that you would just be with him as he speaks, and, Father, that we would be receptive and quick to listen and to put into practice the things we learn that enable us to stand for biblical truth. And we'll thank you in Christ's name. Amen. Dr. Rob Carter.
Good morning. My name is Robert Carter. I am a speaker for Creation Ministries International. I come from Atlanta. This is one of about 12 or 1,300 churches that CMI is going to visit across the world this year. There are about 30 of me in 7 different international offices, and our goal is to bring the Bible to life for people sitting in the pews like this. We have lots of questions. There's lots of confusion, and today's subject is one of the most confusing and questionable subjects that is out there, and that's the question of dinosaurs. They have been used to beat the Christian over the head for 200 years now. It has been claimed that these things prove the earth is millions of years old, prove that evolution is true, prove that the Bible is not true, etc. So we're going to hit some of those questions. Now, I don't pretend to know all the answers. I'm not a paleontologist. I am a scientist, though, and I'm going to approach this scientifically. Basically, I'm a geneticist, and dinosaurs don't have any DNA that we can find. So I can't talk about my favorite subject on dinosaurs, but we can talk about rocks and fossils and the biblical age of the earth and things like that. A lot of what I'm presenting has already appeared in the pages of our Creation magazine, or on our website, creation.com, or on any number of our books or DVDs or one of the movies that we've produced. We're very, very busy producing information for people like you. So that's there for later if you're interested. Okay, I'm going to just ask a bunch of questions. Let's see how we do. The first question is simple. What's a dinosaur? How is a dinosaur different than a turtle or a crocodile? You can look at a dinosaur, you know it's a dinosaur, right? Why is it different than a lizard? Well, the answer is that dinosaurs stand up. All the other reptiles, their legs stick out to the side, except for snakes. So already, boom, we have a difference. Dinosaurs are a different group of reptiles, unique in many different ways. Did you just learn something? Okay. But there's a giant question. And the question is, what happened to the dinosaurs? All we know is that they're gone. What does the world tell us? What killed off the dinosaurs? A big meteor that hit the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, lots of scientists don't believe this, but that is the standard answer. Does anyone know in the evolutionary model when that happened, how many millions of years ago? It's a very important number. Now, I'm going to use evolutionary numbers in my talks because we need to know the numbers. I don't believe the numbers, but the number is 65 million years ago. That is a long time before the Bible says the whole entire universe was created. But the evolutionary number, 65 million years ago, is right at the end of what's called the Cretaceous era, before what's called the Tertiary era. So it's the KT. Cretaceous in German starts with a K, and so it's the KT boundary. That's the end of the dinosaurs. Now, I think that the dinosaurs died out in Noah's flood, and I think there was a meteor hit on the earth, and it was during the flood year. 2 very different models, but nobody knows because we don't have time machines. We can't go back and see it. This is a very different type of science. So I can take a dinosaur bone, I can weigh it, I can measure it, I can look at the mineral composition of the bone, I can look at it under a microscope today. But that doesn't tell me what happened to that dinosaur bone in the past. There's two forms of science here. Things we can test today and things we can wonder about. And this is a wonderment. Nobody knows what happened to the dinosaurs because nobody saw it. No one alive today saw it. And as a mystery, as soon as we start digging into the rocks, we realize dinosaur era rocks are filled with modern organisms. Turtles, crocodiles, butterflies. Now, wait. If a giant meteor hit the earth and caused so much global cooling, it killed off the dinosaurs, how'd the butterflies survive? And the ferns and other delicate organisms. This is a giant mystery. It's not easy to solve, and it's staring us in the face. And so the meteor strike theory, yeah, it's got some explaining to do. All right, another question for you. How many species of dinosaurs were there? Millions? Dozens? Somewhere in between? Who can name a species of dinosaur? Say it. Gigantosaurus. Did someone say Brontosaurus? Yeah, you know Brontosaurus wasn't true, right? All right, in the New York Museum of Natural History, they had this giant dinosaur set up, and the head was from a different species, and it took them over 100 years to realize it. So Brontosaurus got erased. It never existed. And then someone said, oh, wait. It's clearly one of the sauropod dinosaurs. And they looked at the bones. These bones are different enough from the other sauropods. It deserves its own genus. And so they resurrected Brontosaurus again, even though it still doesn't have a head. So that's two species of dinosaurs. We have any more? Raptors, like Velociraptor? Okay. Does anyone want to say something like one of the pterosaurs? Pterodactylus, not pterodactyl. Pterodactylus is the genus. Those aren't dinosaurs. Those are flying reptiles, a whole nother group that I'm not going to talk much about today, another group of extinct reptiles. We also have mosasaurs in the oceans, extinct reptiles with flippers. They're dead also. Plesiosaurs, another different group of marine reptiles. There's a lot of extinct things in the fossil record. They're very different from one another. But we're mainly talking about land dinosaurs today. Here are 11 species of ceratopsid dinosaurs. Protoceratops is not here. Microceratops is not here. But just about everyone knows Triceratops. How about Styracosaurus or Pachyrhinosaurus or Centrosaurus? Do you know those? There are a lot of ceratopsid dinosaurs. Some of them have been erased because they realized that they found this and they named it, but it's just a juvenile form of an older one. Because as we found more, we found the growth series, and we realized that one of these that had a hole in the frill, the hole filled in after a while and became the other one. But there are a few, maybe a dozen, ceratopsid dinosaurs named. And the naming is a problem because they're dead. I can't breed them. I can't do a crossing experiment. I am a biologist. I say if two things can interbreed, they're the same species. If they can't interbreed, I'll call them different species. That's called the biological species concept. I can't breed these. How many species are standing here in the grass? That's the world's largest dog standing next to the world's smallest dog. If paleontologists found bones of these animals in the fossil record, there's no way they would put them into the same species. I know this. They would not do it. They find things that are extremely similar and give them different species. Oh, this one has 3 hairs instead of 2 hairs on its little knuckle here, and they give them different species names. I'm a lumper, not a splitter. I've always been like that. I just generalize things and put them into big categories, and it's worked very well for me over many years. as we learn more and more and more about how things are hybridizing. I just saw a picture of, what was it? It was a grosbeak bird that had interbred with a finch of some sort, and the picture was like this weird bird with a big red bill and splotchy feathers and everything. They say that those two species have been separated for 10 million years, and they can still interbreed? No, that's one species. They might not like each other, they might sing different songs or live in different trees or something, but if they can still interbreed, that's one species. That's one species. How many species are here? I don't know, and we can't know, but I suspect that the ceratopsids are one giant interbreeding gene pool with a lot of diversity within them. Just like dogs and wolves and coyotes that can interbreed. African jackals can interbreed with them also. That's one species. Looking at the fossil record, there's about 50 basic kinds of dinosaurs. You have the ceratopsids and the duck-billed hadrosaurs and the ankylosaurs are like little tanks with a club on its tail. You get the long sauropods, the stegosaurs, the plates in their back, and then the theropods. And the theropods are a challenge because almost all the dinosaurs are plant eaters. The theropods are the meat eaters. You know what a theropod is? This is a theropod. Okay, you'll never forget that now, and now that you know what a theropod is. But look at T-Rex. How would he have originally been described? 6-inch long teeth. Would he have been called an herbivore, a carnivore that eats meat, a scavenger, or an omnivore? Who says carnivore? The fierce predator stalking the Mesozoic plains. They even gave him the name Terrible Lizard King. Wow. But again, he's extinct. How do we know what he ate? And the Bible says something very important. Genesis chapter 1. God talking to Adam. See, I've given you every herb that yields seed which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I've given every green herb for food, and it was so. Christian, let me ask you a question. Did God create all animals to eat plants? Yes or no? Yes. Do we have a problem in paleontology? Yes, because we know some things are eating meat and they're buried in the flood rocks. So we have a question. If God created all animals to eat plants, why do some obviously eat meat and early? Well, the answer to that comes from a passage in Genesis chapter 3. After Adam rebelled against God, God cursed the world. And the world ever since has been, everything in the world ever since has been struggling. God says to Adam, cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread to return to the ground, etc., etc. This is where struggle comes in. The coming of sin into the world led to lots of sin, struggle and death and suffering. This is why the creation in the New Testament yearns for redemption. The creation wants to go back to the way it originally was, where there's no suffering. This is why we as human beings yearn for redemption. We want our eternal heavenly bodies that we don't have yet. And before we have them, life stinks. Lots of bad things are going to happen to us physically. Well, lots of bad things are happening in the natural world also, outside of humanity, and that includes everything, so therefore that includes dinosaurs. But we have to be very careful, because science is fickle. Science will rip the rug right out from underneath you when you're not paying attention. For instance, most of the theropod dinosaurs weren't carnivores, and we didn't know that until very recently. Paleontology has gotten a lot more sophisticated over the decades. Back in the 1800s, some of the greatest fossil finds, the paleontologists would go and they'd see this big dinosaur in the rock, and they'd chisel it out, and they'd bring it back to their museum in Chicago or New York or maybe Pittsburgh, and they'd set it up in a museum, and all these people come and pay money to see these big dinosaurs. Well, the younger generation paleontologists now are going back to those same fossil sites, and they're saying, This has been destroyed. They dug right through the baby dinosaurs. They dug right through all the mammals. They ruined all the plants. They were seeking only the dinosaurs, the big ones, and they ruined everything else. And now what? This is like the best fossil preserved site in the world, and they ruined it. Because what they've realized in recent times is sometimes when you see a dinosaur buried in a rock, if you step back, you can see the outline of the animal's body in the rock. It stained the rock because it was buried entire and decomposed underground. Sometimes you can see his heart, his liver, or his stomach in the rock. And once they realized that, they said, hey, wait, don't take the bone, take the whole rock, and then let's look at the section here that was his stomach. And they started digging into that, and they said, hey, this theropod dinosaur had a stomach packed with plants. He was a plant eater, despite the pointy teeth. Oh, things have changed. Let me give you a modern example you can probably understand. What do black bears eat when they can't get into a garbage can? Out in the woods, what do black bears eat? 99% of their diet is plants. What do polar bears eat? 99% of a polar bear's diet is meat. They have the same claws. They have the same teeth. A black bear can take a blueberry bush and go and pull off the blueberries and leave the leaves on the bush. The same teeth can rip into a seal. You've heard of the word adaptation. What's that? It's when you take a tool and you morph it into something different. Have you ever heard the word acceptation? That's when you take a tool and use it for something it wasn't designed for, but you keep the same tool. So one is changing and one is just reusing. Hey guys, has your wife ever asked you to hang up a picture until you're all manly? Oh, I'm going to go do this. And you go down to your workshop and you get that little drawer with all the little plastic things you stick in the sheetrock, but then you put the screw in it, right? And you go up there into the bedroom and then you realize you forgot your hammer. So you have to poke a hole in the sheetrock. So what do? You take your screwdriver and you turn it around and you go pop, 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 pop on a little screw, and you just use the screwdriver as a hammer. And it works just fine in that condition. That's called acceptation. I imagine two herbivorous bears come off of Noah's Ark. They start reproducing. They have little bear cubs, and they have bear cubs, and they have bear cubs. They start spreading out. And from Ararat, from the region of Ararat, you go north, you're in Siberia. You go south, you're in Arabia. You go west, you're in Europe. You go east, you go all the way to North America. From the Ararat region is all these different environments very close by. And if you go on one side of a mountain range versus another side of a mountain range, you're in very different environments, and the bears can no longer reproduce because the mountain's in the way. They get isolated. And so, as they're spreading out, bears get hungry. And some bears realize they can use their sharp teeth and claws to eat other animals. And other bears who are in a place with abundant plants don't have to, and they don't. When the American chestnut died out, early 1900s, the dominant tree in this area was chestnut at one point. They're gone. A blight from Asia came and wiped out the dominant tree in the eastern United States about 100 years ago. Shocking. But there were reports of chipmunks eating roadkill. Chipmunks, cute little chipmunks, right? They eat acorns, little teethies. No, they run out on the road and probably eating the last chipmunk that tried to cross the road. Because when an animal is hungry, it's going to eat anything it wants, anything it can. You just consider the history of your people and what they used to eat. Gross. Anyway, you get the idea? Adaptation versus acceptation. I believe that can explain a lot of what we see in the natural world. And a lot of carnivores were clearly herbivores. Bears, and I believe dinosaurs also. But we know there's carnivory in the fossil record. This is a T-Rex tooth embedded in the tailbone of a duck-billed dinosaur. And it healed up around the tooth. So not only did this hadrosaur survive a T-Rex attack, it probably walked around in a tremendous amount of pain the rest of his life because he had a tooth embedded in his spine. Yuck. But it's also pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to skip around here. I'm going to imagine that most of you have a basic Bible foundation. So I'm not going to describe Noah's flood. I'm not going to describe the Garden of Eden. I'm just going to jump right to Noah's flood and say, if Noah's flood really happened, what would the result be? Lots of fossils, lots of rocks, lots of mud piled up and dead things buried in those rocks. Okay. But if that did happen, then a lot of dinosaurs would have died during the flood. Do we have evidence for that? Tons. It's actually really surprising when you start looking at it. First, you've seen this before. It's called the dead dinosaur posture. The first Jurassic Park movie back in the 80s, they had this machine boom in the ground, and they all run over to the computer screen. Computers back then were so powerful. It starts drawing a picture like this. And it's the velociraptor. And he's like this. Why are most dinosaurs in that pose? When a cow dies out in a field, it doesn't arch his back and his tail. Yes. Some scientists a couple years ago were studying chickens. If you take a plucked chicken and throw it in cold water, it does this. The muscles on the back, it's called the ligamentum elasticum, the elastic ligament. Long-necked animals, they don't use muscles necessarily to hold their heads up. They have this rubbery sort of muscle thing called the ligamentum elasticum. And so a chicken, boing, 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 he doesn't have to hold his head up actively. It's a rubbery thing that holds his head up. Same with dinosaurs. If you take that animal before he's rotted and make him drown in cold water, they naturally arch backwards. So the dead dinosaur posture, which is something given, that phrase comes from the evolutionary paleontologists, they're now saying that this is evidence of drowning. Now, this explains why so many times you find dinosaurs with fish. And I mean, you see a mixed assemblage of land animals and marine animals all piled up in most of the fossil record. Most of dinosaurs, too. They're clearly buried in water. It's just strange, though, because these are land animals. How come all these land animals drown? Because they were caught up in Noah's flood, because the evolutionary story actually isn't true. Okay, another question for you. Are dinosaurs in the Bible? Is the word dinosaur in the Bible? No, the word wasn't invented until the 1840s, and the Bible had already been English for hundreds of years before that, multiple different translations. If you read the introduction to the original King James Bible, something I highly recommend, it is a beautiful document. It's a statement from the two main translators saying, this is our justification for making this new Bible, and here's what we did, and here's what we struggled with. And they said in there are a number of animals and minerals that are used once. We know from context it's a mineral or an animal, but we don't know which one it is. That's true today. There are some words in the Bible that aren't used anywhere else in any Hebrew ancient literature, and it's only used once in the Bible. So, KJV might say basilisk. The NIV might say ostrich. The ESV might say owl. You know what that means? It's an animal, maybe a bird. But we don't know more than that. It's our limits of knowledge. The Bible might inadvertently be describing things that are dinosaurs, and we just don't know it. In a few cases. The specific word I'm looking for is a word called tannin, which sometimes is translated sea monster, sometimes is translated jackal. That word appears a lot. In context, it's talking about, big scary monster-like thing. And modern translations try to downgrade that, and they typically translate jackal or something like that, which is very unsatisfactory to me. Point is, there's some things we don't know. But if you look in the Bible, there's one very, very interesting passage. This is Job chapter 40. Job has sued God, and God appears in his own defense. You realize that's the book of Job, right? And God says, hey, what about this, and what about this, and what about this, and this? And he's asking Job all these science questions. You know that song, the heavenly storehouse is laden with snow. You know that song, right? No? No? Maybe just because I sang it so terribly. But that's from the book of Job. And all these science questions, and then he turns to this. He says, now behold, behemoth. And right now, this brake should screech, and you say, wait, because you should have trained yourself by now in your Christian walk that when you see a non-English word that's just been transliterated, behemoth, you should translate that. What does it mean? It means beast of beasts. Behold the beast of beasts, which I made as I made you. Oh, that's a reference to Creation Week. He eats grass like an ox. Oh, he's an herbivore. He's got strength in his loins and power in the muscles of his belly. He's very strong. And he makes his tail stiff like a cedar. King James says he hangs his tail like a cedar. All the other Bible translators, I looked at like 15 of them, they all use the phrase like a cedar, which is a very interesting phrase because cedar trees to you are not very impressive. They're scrubby things that grow up in old fields. What's the biggest cedar tree you've ever seen? What's the biggest tree, the cedar tree that Job could have seen? The cedars of Lebanon were massive trees. This is a cedar of Lebanon planted in England just 200 years ago. The cedars of Lebanon are the biggest trees that Job could have possibly have seen. God could have compared his tail to any number of trees in the Bible. Oak, palm, terebinth, myrtle. No, he chose cedar. Now in American context, the Bible said he's got a tail like a sequoia. You know exactly what he's getting at, right? He's got a big old tail, Job. So scientifically, you cannot know, but if you put all the pieces together, if you look at all the ancient animals, all the modern animals, there's one animal that fits this description very clearly. The largest land animal that God created, the sauropod dinosaurs, deserve the title beast of beasts. They were herbivores, they were really strong, and had a really long tail. Can I know the Bible's describing sauropod dinosaurs? No. But I think it's a pretty strong candidate there, and it's very interesting. So see what I'm doing as a scientist? I'm trying to lay out, here's what we can know, here's what we can't know, here's what might be true, here's what is true. That's very important for the Christian to do that. Because a lot of times a skeptic is attacking you on something they can't know either. And they make it look like, putting you on your back foot, oh, Christian, you don't know what you're talking about, this is not true. And wait a sec, Mr. Skeptic, you don't know that. That is not a guaranteed fact. This is a fact, and this is a supposition. I have a different supposition, and therefore, we're not arguing over anything that's going to prove anyone right or wrong. You want to get into a debate? You got to talk about what you can know. And what we can know is not nearly as much as what people think. You okay with that? Okay. Another question for you. Given Noah's flood, let's say Noah's flood was worldwide, like the Bible describes. Let's say it happens 4,500 years ago, like the Bible describes. We have a problem, don't we? How could Noah fit dinosaurs on the ark? Let me give you like 3 or 4 possibilities. 1, within each kind of dinosaur, sauropods, the ceratopsids, you name it. There are a range of species, and some of the species, full grown, are small. In fact, the average dinosaur in the fossil record is about as big as a pony. There are tons of little dinosaurs. We don't see them in the museums because they don't attract visitors. There are many more little ones than big ones. They find the big one, that's the one they set up. This is Compsognathus, fully grown, he's the size of a chicken. Not a problem with that guy. 2, dinosaurs came from eggs. The biggest dinosaur ever to walk the face of this planet came out of an egg smaller than an ostrich egg. I just saw recently the biggest dinosaur egg ever discovered. It's about that big, but it's flat. You know why it's flat? Because if it was a sphere, the animal would suffocate inside. You can't get an egg this big. You can't get the Fred Flintstone egg. That's physiologically impossible. Because chicken and dinosaur, alligator, they have to breathe through the shell. Oxygen has to get in. If you have a big animal inside a relatively small surface area shell, you suffocate. So the big dinosaur egg is flattened, which makes more surface area so that animal can survive inside. But the biggest dinosaurs ever come out of a fairly small egg. Noah could have taken hatchlings. He could take in juveniles. He could take in teenagers. He doesn't need great-great-granddaddy Apatosaurus. But even if he had to take the biggest ones, how many would he have had to take? 2 of each kind. How many kinds? About 50. That's about 100 dinosaurs. Whoop-de-doo. Even the fully grown dinosaurs could fit on Noah's Ark with no problem. Even the biggest ones. But he doesn't have to take the biggest ones. But see what I just did? I said, here's a whole bunch of possible answers, but even the worst case scenario is still possibly doable. This is not a stretch. It's not a threat. It's not a big problem. There's tons of ways to answer that question. Any one of them I'm happy with. You ever wonder what happened to all the big animals that ever lived? All the largest everything are extinct. I have a fossil I found in Florida. It's 11 skin bones from an armadillo. Now, armadillos, they have these little hexagonal plates about that big and have little holes in them, and that's why they're armored, right? They have this armor backing with all these bones in their skin. Well, the things I found were that big. The armadillo was as large as a Volkswagen. It's called a glyptodont. They're extinct. The biggest elephants, the biggest snakes, the biggest turtles, the biggest dinosaurs, the biggest everything are extinct. Why? Because large animals have more problems than small animals. A large animal has to survive longer before it starts to reproduce. A large animal needs more food. Any drought or something like that, it's got a problem. A large animal tends to lay larger eggs, which requires more energy to produce. Small animals are always at an advantage. So this giant Andean condor, now I actually held a California condor on my arm once. Its wingspan was larger than my arm span. I was like, this bird's huge. That's nothing compared to the ancient one. But imagine that there's this condor population in the Americas after the flood. And they're growing and growing, and more condors. And some of them have genes for bigness, and some of them have genes for smallness. Well, by the time that one lays an egg, it might be 10 years old. Well, the smaller ones went through 10 generations already. And when you start multiplying generations, maybe there's went from 2 to 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 1,000,000 before that one lays a single egg. So genetically over time, anything large that delays reproduction is not going to be represented in the future population. Everything should get smaller because of math and because of starvation. If the dinosaurs were large that Noah took on the ark, the reason they're not here today was simply that they didn't survive in the post-flood world, which would have been a very difficult place for anything to survive, which is why we see so much extinction in the fossil record. Yet, if God created dinosaurs, if dinosaurs lived on Earth with Noah, with Adam, with humanity, we should have some memory of it. If they're extinct, I expect the memory is going to become a fish story and get very distorted over time. And I submit to you that if you look at dragons in ancient history, they fulfill all the requirements of dinosaurs. They're big, scaly, reptilian things. But later on in the medieval period, they cast magic spells and they breathe fire. That's not like the ancient descriptions. It's the later descriptions that are very fanciful and magical. But the ancient ones, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of stories from the New World, from the Old World, all over the world, stories of people interacting with really big lizards. And usually the lizard dies. It might kill a person or two, but everyone comes out with their spears and they kill the thing. Because you can't survive with a big lizard in your pond. It's got to die. Pardon me a second. It's hard to think when you're really thirsty. Oh, much better. And yet, if man did live with dinosaurs, we'd expect something to pass through the generations. I know a lot of creationists throw up a lot of information at this point when talking about dinosaurs in archaeology or in history, and I'm skeptical of most of it. I'm going to give you only my best examples, the things I like the most. One of them is the floor of Carlisle Cathedral in England. There's a tomb from Bishop Bell. He was buried 600 years ago. Dinosaurs weren't discovered until the early 1800s. This is hundreds of years before we knew what dinosaurs were. And if you look at this, you see how this brass square or rectangle goes around his tomb, and some parts are broken away, but there's some parts that are still there. When the parts that are still there, we see carvings of these animals. Look, there's a bat, there's a dog. Look, he's a male dog, he's got a racing collar on him. There's a fish, there's a wading bird. Anyone disagree with me? So the person who drew those things knew what they were drawing, correct? This looks like two sauropod dinosaurs with their necks, you can barely see it here, their necks wrapped around each other. Their legs are correct, their tails are held out right. This guy has two spikes on his tail. Two species of sauropod dinosaurs we've discovered so far have spikes on their tail. Most do not. Whoa. It's actually a very common theme in ancient history, is two sauropod-like animals with their necks wrapped around each other. Now, if you think that doesn't look real, well, consider Tenostropheus. We see it all over the place. Very odd for them to be drawing this. This is one of my other favorites. This is Angkor Wat, the head of the Khmer Empire in Cambodia. 500 years or so ago, it was the largest city in the world. Larger than anything in Europe. They had an amazing technology for water control, and they could flood rice paddies and feed this massive population because of their system of irrigation. But then they went through a big drought, and most of the city died. And then the jungle came and covered it. And now that all the wars in Southeast Asia are done, archaeologists are going back and are hacking back the jungle and exposing this giant city that was lost in the forest. It's really amazing. But in the Top Prom temple, on one particular door frame, we see the similar. There's a Buddha, there's a demon-y thing, there's a couple of people up here, there's a water buffalo, and there's that thing. What's your first response? What does that look like? It sure does look like a stegosaurus. Now, his head is too big. He's got this funny thing here, but he's standing upright. He's got a tail. It looks like a stegosaurus. Right around the corner, someone realizes another stegosaurus-like creature and looks even more like a stegosaurus than this one does. But it can't be a stegosaurus because stegosauruses died out 65 million years ago, didn't they? Or maybe they didn't. And maybe there's a memory that has persisted through centuries. Maybe someone in Southeast Asia actually saw one of these, or their grandfather had seen one of them and described it to them. But for some reason, they decided to carve this in their temple right next to things you can easily recognize, just like in Bishop Bell's tomb. So let me ask you another question. Was there an age of dinosaurs? Was there a time when dinosaurs dominated the landscape? Notice in this picture you and I all grew up with, there's no grass. There's no birds. There's no mammals. This is completely and utterly wrong. Remember I talked about the stomach contents of sauropod dinosaurs? Well, as we're sampling the stomach contents of dinosaurs and as we're looking at dinosaur dung, it's the strangest thing. Have you ever walked out your backyard and tripped over a piece of fossilized cat mess? That stuff doesn't last very long, does it? I mean, one rain is gone. We have hundreds of thousands of petrified dinosaur dungs. I've got one sitting on my mantelpiece at home. How'd you like this for a job? What do you do? I polish dinosaur poop. And so what scientists do is they'll take it, they'll cut it, they polish it, and they look at it under a microscope. And you can see what the animal had been eating. I was taught, even up to graduate school, grasses didn't evolve until 35 million years ago. Grasses that cover the world today, everything from the stuff on your lawn to bamboo forests of China, it's grass. 35 million years ago, that's 30 million years after the dinosaurs supposedly died out. And yet when we look at dinosaur dung, we see all the major families of grasses. So we know grass and dinosaurs were together. They're just not in the fossil record together other than in dinosaur dung. The fossil record is fickle. Some things are preserved, some things aren't. You simply can't say, this didn't exist. You don't know it didn't exist. It just wasn't petrified along with these other things. And grass is a clear example of that. We know they lived with dinosaurs. And so did mammals, and so did birds, and so did a lot of other things. Just a few. Now, I'm going to use the phrase here, MA, that's mega annum, or millions of years ago. I put it in quotes, should put it in scare quotes. That's the evolutionary estimate of how long ago these things lived. But here's a Mesozoic flying squirrel on the left. That is a platypus. And that groove in the jaw, that's for the giant nerve that runs to the bill of the platypus so they can close their eyes and look for worms in mud in the dark. This is a badger-like creature. He had a baby Psittacosaurus in his stomach. So in the morning of Noah's flood, that mammal ate a dinosaur for breakfast. There's a beaver-like creature. He was preserved with his hairs. But look at the date. 164 million years ago, there were beaver-like things? That's before most of the dinosaurs supposedly evolved. They're very highly developed mammals predating dinosaurs. When I was in school, I was taught that, oh yeah, mammals existed during the time of the dinosaurs at the end. They're little mouse-like, shrew-like kind of things. And after the dinosaurs died out, that's when all the mammals evolved into the modern mammals we see today. Well, yeah, there were a few bird-like things at the end of the dinosaur era. But after the dinosaurs died out, that's when all the modern birds evolved. That's a story that I heard. It's not true. That's a hedgehog. It looks like a hedgehog. It's the size and shape of a hedgehog. And you've seen hedgehogs, right? They're not porcupines. They're hedgehogs. They're really cute little animals. Their hairs are unique. No other animal on Earth has hairs like a hedgehog. And the hairs are preserved in that rock. And it has hedgehog hairs. So anytime you see, the next Jurassic Park, Jurassic. Almost every one of those dinosaurs is Cretaceous. Arg. Anyway, next time you see a Jurassic Park movie, there should be hedgehogs and beavers and flying squirrels. But they're not going to show you that. Have you ever seen the movie Hidden Figures? Kevin Costner? All right, you got to go look it up. Great movie about these really, really, really smart African-American ladies working for NASA that got the astronauts to the moon by calculating before they even had computers. Brilliant. Absolutely amazing movie. Well, there's a facility in Maryland that NASA has, and there was a guy a couple years ago, he was dropping off his wife to go to work, and he was driving through the parking lot, and he looked over in the woods, and he saw this rock. He goes, hey, I'm going to go look at this rock. So he parks, he gets out, and he finds one of the world-class fossil discoveries ever. It's about this big. It's literally the construction debris. They dug a hole for the basement of this building 80 years ago and threw the stuff on the side, and trees grew up around it. And this rock has a sauropod footprint, pterosaur footprints, nodosaur footprints, a nodosaur dung that has been petrified, or a dinosaur dung, a nodosaur osteoderm, which is a bone in the skin, and mammal footprints. Fossils aren't just bones. Fossils are also behavior. And we know clearly that dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and mammals lived at the same time. They even left their footprints in the same mud puddle. That's just cool. Let's talk about birds. This is a very difficult subject. There are a lot of very weird things in the fossil record. Do we acknowledge that? God didn't necessarily create things in nice, neat little categories. You okay with that? He created the platypus. What is that? Well, he created a lot of weird birds also. A lot of birds in the fossil record have teeth. A lot of birds in the fossil record have a flat breastbone. You eat a chicken, there's a keel on the chicken, right? Right here on the breastbone. You know what that does? It creates a stronger muscle so the bird can fly. Now, chickens can't fly, but, most birds have a thing here that gives them mechanical advantage and helps them to fly. Birds have hollow bones, makes them very light. A bird's thigh is actually inside of its rib cage. and it makes its rib cage is fused like the roll cage of a race car. When you see a bird hopping, it's actually hopping on his tiptoes. Its heel is about here, which is why their legs are backwards, because that's his heel, just like a camel. Weird. Anyway, there are really weird things in the fossil record. But there's one modern bird that defies classification. It's called the hoatzin, or the stink bird of South America. They have a flat breastbone, like a lot of the ancient birds. They have wing claws, and the claws are perfectly functional. The little babies will clamber all over the trees using their claws. You realize that the fingers of a bird are its wing. You know that? Just like a bat. Those are its fingers, its wing. So when you see dragons, like, had to train my dragon or something, when you see something with 2 legs and 2 arms and 2 wings, no, the wings should be the arms. Pterosaurs, that's their wings, their arms they're flying with. The 4-legged animal thing is like all throughout the entire animal kingdom, or at least the vertebrate kingdom, vertebrate group. So here we have the hoatzin, a weird bird, and it has a lot of features. It almost looks like an Archaeopteryx, but an Archaeopteryx has teeth, and these guys don't. What's the difference between a jaw and a bill? What can a bird do that you cannot? A bird can do this. You can't. You can't move your upper jaw. That's what a bill is. And we see bills and jaws in different places in the fossil record. This is Anchiornis huxleyi, named after Darwin's bulldog, Mr. Huxley, the grandfather of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. Oh boy. Anyway, supposedly 160 million years ago, it's a bird. Look, it's got feathers. Oh, by the way, you see the tail? Birds don't have tails. They have feathers. The little thing that sticks off the back. Next time you eat a chicken, look at the rear end. It's a little thing called a pygostyle, just a couple of bones, and the feathers of a chicken are just feathers sticking off this little nub on his rear end. Your Labrador Retriever has a tail, and when he's happy, he's wagging his tail, and he goes across you, and he whacks you in the knee. Oh, man, that hurts, and you stupid dog, get out of here. Why does it hurt when a dog hits you with his tail? Because the tail's full of bones, right? It's a spinal cord going down to the tip of his tail, the spinal column. Birds aren't like that. That is a bird. It has a pygostyle, it has a beak, and it has feathers. Can feathers be preserved in the fossil record? Absolutely. Do dinosaurs have feathers? Hold that thought. Here's another amazing bird. This is the only bird ever discovered with an egg still inside it. But the egg has multiple layers of eggshell. If you take a bird and don't let it roost and don't let it lay its egg and keep on chasing it, every day it lays on another layer of eggshell. And this animal obviously was stressed before it died, couldn't find a place to land, and finally drowned, and it was buried. Cool. I know this is hard to see. This is a very critically important fossil. This bird, clearly, it's got bird legs, it's got a bird tail, it's got feathers, it's got wings, it's got a beak. His lungs are preserved. And this is really interesting because bird lungs are weird. A bird doesn't breathe like you do. It might breathe in and out of his nose, but the air goes out the bottom of his lungs and comes around the other side. They have a flow-through lung. You breathe like this, you go, your air only goes down to about here. Then the oxygen has to diffuse down, the carbon dioxide has to diffuse up before it gets to the part where the air is actually moving. You can't pull a lot of oxygen out of the air, which is why we can't run a 2-minute mile. It's not possible. We cannot pull that much oxygen to fuel our muscles to do that. But a bird could. Birds don't have dead space in their lungs. They have a fully ventilated lung. Sorry, I'm looking for big scientific words. But reptiles are different. Look at a crocodile. Yeah, he breathes. But he doesn't have a diaphragm like we do. He moves his liver like that. His liver goes in and out, and that's how they inflate and deflate their lungs. So in the evolution, if you would, of a reptile lung to a bird lung, the first thing that has to happen is the animal has to develop a hole in the bottom of their lung. And then the animal dies. There's an unbridgeable gap here. The physiology of the bird is so radically different. To transition from one lung type to another, there's all these intermediary steps that are impossible. So evolution can't work here. The bird lung is so radically different and so incredibly well designed, it clearly did not evolve. So I don't care if they say that birds cluster with, okay, another subject here. Are humans animals? Yeah, scientifically, I know not spiritually, but scientifically, we fit in the animal group. Are we mammals? Yeah, we have all the characteristics of mammals. Are we primates? Yeah. What species is most closest to humans? It's a chimpanzee. They look like us, they act like us in some ways, they eat the same foods we eat, just they're dumb as a box of rocks and we fly to the moon. That's the difference, right? But similarity is not evolutionary descent. It's just God created them similar to us. I'm fine with that. So human beings, we cluster within a group, within a group, within a group, within a group. And there we are. Birds do the same thing with reptiles. Birds cluster within reptiles. First thing you pull off is the crocodiles and the turtles and the snakes and things like that. And then you're left with dinosaurs. And pull out some of the sauropods and things like that. And they cluster with a subgroup of dinosaurs. I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that. I don't care. It's just the way it worked out. Does the Bible say dinosaurs do not have feathers? No. I want to know if they have feathers or not. I'm comfortable feathered dinosaurs or not feathered dinosaurs. Oh, sorry. I got ahead of myself. I'm going to skip over this one. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. That's the fossil record of mammals and birds. On top of, on the left, the fossil record of dinosaurs. Mammals and birds lived through the entire fossil record of dinosaurs. They didn't evolve at the end. Just saying. Dun, dun, dun. Here's what I want to get to. Did dinosaurs have feathers? This is Sinosauropteryx, the first so-called feathered dinosaur. They beat us over the head with this for about 10 years. And then Alan Fiducia, who's an evolutionist, who believes in evolution but doesn't believe that birds evolved from dinosaurs, looked at us under a microscope and said, I see the animal's skin, and that fuzz is underneath his skin. Clearly there's on feathers. Feathers have to be on the other side of the skin. Yet, we have found a lot of other evidence of feathers on dinosaurs, but different. We've never found a dinosaur with feathers like you think of, like on an eagle. But consider a chick. It's got these fuzzy little things, right? They found fuzzy sort of things on dinosaurs. There are also quills, feathers that don't have the plume, just quilly-like things that are pointed at the end and get a little larger. They found sort of things like that on dinosaurs also. Okay, so dinosaurs might have had adornment, but they didn't fly until you get to the weird dinosaur-like birds, which I can't classify. But this is the wing of a turkey vulture. And if you take away the feathers, you see all these knobs. Those are called quill knobs. Feathers are attached to the bone with a little muscle. And you've seen pictures of birds flying and their feathers like stick up. Well, that's the little muscle pulling and changing the direction of the feather. And that causes a knob to form on the bone. This is a velociraptor arm, and that rectangle is here, and his arrow is pointing at these 6 little dots that you probably can't even see. They're called quill knobs. Yeah. Ostriches don't have quill knobs, and they have feathers. Penguins don't have quill knobs, and they have feathers. Albatrosses don't have quill knobs, and they have feathers. Not all the birds that have feathers have quill knobs. Only the ones that actively move their feathers. No one believes a velociraptor could fly. Why would they even have quill knobs, even if they had feathers? I'm not saying dinosaurs didn't have feathers. I'm saying I'm still willing to be persuaded, but I haven't been fully persuaded. We know T-Rex had no feathers. We got multiple skin fossils of T-Rex from different parts of his body. You know the difference between a feather and a scale? A scale is just a lump in the skin. A feather is more like a hair. It has to grow from a follicle, which make a hole in the skin, and has to grow. It's like a hyper-complex hair. It grows inside, and when it pops out, it unfurls into this very incredibly complex structure. But no evidence of feathers or anything of the sort on T-Rex. All right. That was a little confusing because I'm still on the fence on this. But let me end with a very clear statement. If dinosaur fossils cannot be millions of years old, the evidence of evolution will fail. If dinosaur fossils are new, are young, clearly they're only dead a few thousand years at most ago. This is some pictures from the inside of a triceratops horn. Some of my friends found this in Montana, took it back to the lab and looked under an electron microscope. Those are cells. They're called osteoblasts, little spikes on them. That's clearly bone cells. Intact cells? Yeah, it's not petrified. This is a non-petrified dinosaur bone. And we found non-petrified dinosaur bones all over the world now that we've realized that they're there. From Madagascar to China to Montana, we found non-petrified dinosaur bones. But something like that, I mean, I can't eat a ham sandwich, or I can't make a ham sandwich and leave it on my counter for a week before it starts turning green. Could I kill a pig and bury it in my backyard for a decade and expect to find anything left? How about 1,000 years? How about 1,000,000 years? How about 70 million years? No way. This is material taken out of a T-Rex leg bone. It's still flexible. It still stinks. It's got blood vessels and red blood cells. Not millions of years old. All the laws of science tell us that things decay very quickly. They can't be preserved for that long. These are cells taken from dinosaurs. Intact cells, unbroken. And they stain them with a stain that I've used in the lab. Now, this is my field. This is genetics. This is a stain that stains DNA. And look, it looks like it lit up the nucleus. But bacteria have DNA. What if that's a bacteria living inside this dinosaur cell? Well, that's what the second picture is for. They stained it with a stain for a protein that bacteria don't have. But you have it. And dinosaurs would have had it, because reptiles have it. It's called a histone. It's a protein the DNA wraps around inside the nucleus. And it lit it up. DNA cannot last for millions of years, period, unless you want to discount all of experimental science. So here I am as a creationist saying, hey, Mr. Evolutionist, the evidence is pointing us clearly to dinosaur fossils not being millions of years old. What part of science do you want to reject? I like that. All right, much more in Creation Magazine, much more on creation.com. Cool book in the back, Dire Dragons. We've already sold one, maybe two. This author also has a book called, he's gotten a series of these books. You can find them on creation.com. Really interesting information in there. We have a little kid's book, Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb. This is so popular, we wrote a second one called Exploring Dinosaurs with Mr. Hibb. Mr. Hibb's a little cricket. He's going around the world asking questions about rocks and minerals and fossils and things. And honestly, I learned stuff in that book I didn't know. So it's really an adult book masquerading as a kid's book, so the adults can understand it too. Here's a series of kids' books. There's piles of stuff in the back for you to take advantage of if you like. But I'm going to leave you with this. 1 Peter 3:15. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for reason of the hope that's in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. I hope you didn't see mocking in my voice this morning. There's no call for that. That's for the internet. We can stand confidently and competently on the Word of God and defend it without resorting to dirty tricks, because we have the truth on our side and the information is on our side. We just have to be brave enough to acknowledge it. And I hope I've encouraged some of you this morning to do just that. Thank you. I'll see you again in the next hour.